FAIRtax is coming, don't stand in the way. FAIRtax is coming across the USA. FAIRtax is coming, clean up this mess. We got to get rid of the IRS. Hey, hey! Hey, hey! On April 15th, when you're all out.
Hello and welcome once again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
And we are
the FAIRtax Guys.
And before we get into what our special event of the day is on this episode, let's invite people to, we've invited them to support the FAIRtax all along. Let's invite them to talk to us. The FAIRtax Guys at gmail.com and where else can they talk to us?
Oh, well, they can go to our Facebook page, all right? Just look for the FAIRtax Guys on Facebook, and I believe it's facebook.com/the FAIRtax Guys. You can leave comments there. You can go to, let's see, Bob already mentioned the email address.
Yes, the FAIRtax Guys at gmail.com, and we do read it.
Yep, and along with us, I mean, if you ask us a question that we're not real sure of, we have experts backing us up in the national and our state organization. So anything you want to know about the FAIRtax or whatever, let us know, and we'll do our best to answer you as quickly as possible.
All righty. We have a special guest with us today.
Oh.
Second time this man has been nice enough to talk to us.
Yeah, this is great. Congressman Yoho. Congressman Ted Yoho, 3rd District, Florida. I am in that district, and I'm so pleased that he's my congressman. He's not just a co-sponsor of the FAIRtax. He is an active and effective fan of the FAIRtax up in Congress. He talks to people about it. He talks to people in business and so forth. He really helps promote. I wish we had 100 of this guy, because we could really use it. We'd have the FAIRtax pass tomorrow. But he's a true advocate of the FAIRtax, and you'll see in this upcoming
cards
interview.
Around in his pocket.
Yeah, he made quite a stir when at a town hall he had somebody. Me. I asked him about the FAIRtax. He knows when he sees me that he's going to get a question about the FAIRtax, and he pulled our FAIRtax prebate card. Yeah, FAIRtax business card or prebate card out of his pocket. He carries it around with him all the time. So if anybody asks him about the FAIRtax, he gives them this little card. By the way, you can get that prebate card or the FAIRtax business card at our logo store, FAIRtaxLogoStore.org. FAIRtaxLogoStore.org, and you can go there and buy hats and shirts and all kinds of FAIRtax gear.
All right. Well, this is a genuine, bona fide good guy. So let's get right on with our interview today with Congressman Ted Yoho. And FAIRtax Power Radio is pleased today to be talking with Congressman Ted Yoho, represents the 3rd Congressional District here in Florida. Thank you so much for talking with us, sir.
Great to be here, and I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to speak to you.
Well, first order of business is to recognize that you have been a supporter of the FAIRtax from the word go, a co-sponsor of the FAIRtax.
Right.
And we want to thank you very much for that and urge you to continue in well-doing.
Well, I appreciate that, and that's something we believed in. We ran on it. We did the research on it. And it's just, if you're going to tax anybody, I think the FAIRtax is the best way to do it and the only way to do it.
Amen. Well, we need more folks like you in Congress, no doubt about that. But first thing I want to get into with you is that we heard earlier in the year how tax reform was going to be this huge issue in the election, a high priority item for Congress, and you heard all kinds of calls about we need to simplify the system, get rid of the IRS. But now that we've got the nominees in place, we're about ready to crank up in earnest. This rash of terrorist attacks and police shootings seems to have just, taken all the air out of the room and taken over as the issue that people are talking about. Give me an idea of how much urgency, how much enthusiasm remains in Congress at this time for tax reform.
Well, I can tell you, tax reform is on the agenda. It is something that they've talked about. We've been pushing for it. And this is something all of America agrees in. It doesn't matter what political affiliation you are. When they do the polling, it's over 72% of everybody, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, NPAs, want tax reform. When you got that much public sentiment behind you, it's a no-brainer. We need to do it. And we need to do it to jumpstart the economy and to create investments here and bring manufacturing back to America.
Mm-hmm. Of course, when you got a bunch of people kind of looking at the same abstract goal, there are a bunch of different ways that people want to get there.
Yeah.
I've heard, of course, about the better way that came out of the House Ways and Means Committee. That's basically the Paul Ryan plan. Of course, Donald Trump's talking about cutting rates and getting rid of loopholes, and the fair tax has been out there for 15 years. Is there anything else out there in the pipeline that we might not have heard too much about, or are those going to be basically the three choices?
Those are probably going to be the three choices. We were, out of our office, we put in a bill to get rid of the Section 179 unlimited for 10 years, just as an interim to get further or closer to the fair tax passing. I can say Kevin Brady, who is the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, and that's Committee of Jurisdiction over the tax policies of this country, and incidentally, not the president, but the House Ways and Means Committee is a jurisdictional committee. He has looked at the fair tax. He says, yes, we are taking a serious look at it, but he says we're also looking at other options. I'm happy to say in the proposal they have come up with is they've made some strides towards the fair tax. It's not the fair tax per se, but it's a stepping stone. Devin Nunes out of California had something that was kind of a mixture between the fair tax policies that we have and some of the other things that we can do that would jumpstart our economy. And those are good proposals because we're moving in that direction. And then Bob Goodlatte put in a bill that we've co-sponsored that completely eliminates the IRS. I think it's by the year 2020.
Yes, and that definitely needs to happen.
It gets rid of it, which would force us as a nation to redo our tax code. So these things are on the books. The Republican, the better way, if you want to talk about that, I'll be happy to answer any questions on that.
Okay. Well, I'm just wondering, is the fair tax kind of the ultimate goal and we're looking at an intermediate step? Is that kind of what this better way is doing? Because I know that Kevin Brady has also been a fair tax co-sponsor for a long time.
Sure.
He surprised a lot of folks in the fair tax movement by coming out behind the better way. What's going on there?
Well, committee chairmanships, they have some allegiance to the bigger picture. And you've got to try to get the 435 members of Congress to get on board with something. He has been a co-sponsor of that, and I think that's why it saw so much traction this Congress versus others. I think what you're going to see, what they've rolled out, certainly is kind of a compromise. You know that word in Congress, compromise, which always scares me because I feel Congress has been compromising for the last 50 years, and it's led us to $20 trillion in debt and the tax code that we have now. But with that, in Kevin's plan, it revamps the IRS from a 19th or a 20th century business model to a 21st. It reduces the tax returns to a postcard. It does away with the death tax. So, I mean, we can, we've been pushing for that, and that's certainly something we all support out of the fair tax. And it reduces our taxable income, which, goes from 7 different categories of a progressive tax to 3. So we're moving in the right direction.
That's good. But I've read some of the research and what some of the experts that were hired to help design this thing were saying. And a lot of them had really complimentary things to say about a consumption tax versus the income tax.
That's true because they call it a consumption tax in their better way terminology, and I'm like, well, isn't that interesting?
Why don't you just go directly to the only consumption tax that's out there? That's what I'm not quite clear on. What was their thinking there?
I'm not sure what theirs were, but I think of that saying by Abe Lincoln that the future comes but one day at a time, and it's a slow process to make those kind of changes. And, it's something with what you guys have done in the Fair Tax organization, the public awareness that has been brought up by your organization, the public education that you've done, and you come up and you talk to members of Congress, and certainly people like us or Rob Woodall, who's the sponsor of that bill, us up there talking about it, putting pressure on the different powers that be up there. It's raised the awareness and getting the consumer behind it, getting the populace behind it. The other thing is what I have seen is the business community is pretty much void in a lot of these discussions, and I think we all need to do a better job of educating our businesses of what it can and can't do.
Has this Better Way plan actually been reduced into legislative language and submitted as a bill yet that you know of?
No, sir, it has not.
Anything else besides the fair tax that's actually in legislative bill form at this time that you know of?
There is nothing I know of other than what passed last year with the reduction of the 179 tax deduction, which, if the fair tax passes, all those loopholes go away. All those other programs go away, and it's the best way to go. But we're moving in that direction, and with the 179 that got passed last year that made any deduction you put into business, you can write that stuff off as an expense. That's something to jumpstart the economy. I know it doesn't promote the fair tax, but it's something that will stimulate our economy.
Yeah, the tax reform is something that people, that's not a real sexy topic that people like to talk about a lot, but when you tie it into how it's going to help the economy, that's how you've really got to promote this stuff. And I don't think the fair tax is anywhere close to anything else. Nobody else is close to the fair tax in what it would do for the economy.
Right, and there's just a lot of misinformation out there. There's so many people out there thinking it's a sales tax, it's a VAT tax, it's going to increase your taxes 23%. And those are all misinformation.
Yeah, I've heard those dishonest political ads making those kind of claims.
It really is. And when you get rid of the embedded taxes that get added to a product, and I always use the example of a 2x4 you buy from the local discount store or wholesale store. Mm-hmm. When you buy that 2x4, you're paying a tax on it. But you paid a lot of embedded tax because the guy that grew the tree had taxes by the labor that planted the tree. The guy that harvested that tree put taxes on the price of that 2x4 by his labor, the equipment he bought. Those all get added into the price of that 2x4, and then it gets sold to the sawmill, and the labor gets added to that. And by the time it gets to us, the consumer, you've got that embedded tax that we know adds up to about 23%. So it gets rid of that and decreases the cost of that product.
Yeah, that's kind of a hard concept for some people to grab for understand. They understand that when you buy something, you're paying for the labor and materials, but they don't understand that the tax liability and the compliance costs, that is through the roof in a lot of industry. All that gets passed right on as well.
Sure, it's passed on to the consumer. And, that's something, that people just don't understand, like you said. And that's, again, why the public awareness of what you guys do is so important.
Okay, back to what's going on in Congress here. I have heard several reports that while not embracing the fair tax per se, that a lot of people on the Democratic side of the aisle that have just looked at the fair tax as a Republican idea and therefore we don't like it. But a lot of Democrats are now becoming more open to the possibility of a consumption tax of some kind. Is that true in your experience?
Some of the members, I've seen that, but also some of them think the fair tax is something that's just going to help the wealthy, and it's going to, hurt the poor people or the people of a lower economic scale, which we know it doesn't because of the prebate. And it's something that is really more beneficial to people on the lower income scales because of the prebates. And so again, it's public awareness, but I do have people on the Democratic side when we talk, they talk about a consumption tax. And then the thing that scares me with that is some of them want to go right to the VAT tax, which we don't want to do that.
Well, some of them would want a consumption tax on top of the income tax, and that's one thing we got to be sure we don't get.
Well, and that's what's good about the fair tax, because in order for it to be implemented, it has to do away with the IRS.
Absolutely. It gets rid of the 16th Amendment, which means
that's
that
right.
the Supreme Court held before the 16th Amendment was passed that an income tax was unconstitutional. And they had to put that in there to get income taxes in the first place. So the fair tax, again, is the only one I know of that does that. Gets rid of is contingent upon the repeal of the 16th Amendment. An act of Congress can't change the Constitution.
Well, and I think for the safety of the American consumers and businesses, if they understood that, they would rally behind us. But I think when they hear taxes, they're thinking you're going to add on to our already burdensome tax code. And it's up to us, the people in Congress, it's up to people like you and your organization, the FAIRtax organization, to go out and educate people and say what really happens is we get rid of those old taxes, you get rid of the IRS, and this is what we pay, and everybody is paying this. It captures that money that's in the underground economy that is outside of all the taxes that we pay, and you determine as an individual or as a consumer how much money you want to pay in taxes.
Okay. How widespread in Congress is the misconception that the prebate will just be another entitlement?
I think that's pretty high because where there's not good information, I don't want to say that. There's plenty of good information out there. But when people don't understand what the prebate is, a lot of people don't understand the prebate's there, that it's there for everybody. And when they understand it, they don't view it as an entitlement because it's your money.
It's basically a tax refund, just like we've got in the current system. And I don't know too many people who would, begrudge Donald Trump or someone at that end of the financial scale his tax refund if he's entitled to one.
Right.
But they don't want him to get the prebate. I've never understood that.
Well, again, it's misconceptions and misunderstanding of that. And I think, again, studying it, reading the books on it, reading different articles on it on both sides of the aisle, people that are for it and people that are against it. When you understand what that does, it is the fairest way to do this. That or nobody pays any taxes, and we can't do that in a civil society because if you need government, a certain amount of it, you need roads and bridges, you need infrastructure. Somebody has to pay for that, so you do have to have a taxing authority. And who uses all those things? Everybody. So everybody should pay something.
So you think it is possible to bring more Democrats on board once they fully understand what the fair tax is all about?
I think it's possible, and even more Republicans, because I have some other Republicans that are just, no, we're not going to go down here. They like the loopholes. They like that because they have groups that come in and they'll lobby, and probably one of the biggest ones, and we deal with this, is the real estate industry. They'll come in and say, well, we don't want to get rid of the home interest deduction. I've used that, and it is a nice deduction.
Yes.
But I would forego that. I would forego the $179. If I could get rid of the IRS and get them out of my life, and my tax return is a postcard that I send in and I pay my taxes based on what I decide to buy, if I could do that, I would be happy to move down and go into the fair tax. And that's just more we have to talk to people about.
Do we have a feeling on what the timetable is going to be for the House Ways and Means Committee actually starts digging in and looking at these various tax proposals? I've heard late this year, early next year.
No, I don't think you'll see anything until after the presidential and the swearing in of the next president. A lot of that is the thing that people in Congress and those committees are waiting on, because if you get one president, they're going to go in one direction. He'll want to go to do this. If you get another president, she won't want to go down this road. Oh, I shouldn't have said that.
Oh, well.
I didn't mention any names, though.
Yeah, you're right. It is what it is. In your opinion, do you think the fair tax can get a fair evaluation in Ways and Means?
I think it can. And the way it will do that is by the public, we the people, making enough noise with their representatives to get them to stand up and say, we want to have this weighed in. The studies are out there. It's revenue neutral. We know it's going to jumpstart the economy. And the easiest sell for me is I ask people, I said, how'd you like to keep 100% of your paycheck? It's just as you were talking about your son, now that he's paying taxes, your grandson, now that he's paying taxes, it's got his attention. And when you tell people, say, look at your paycheck. Look at the gross and look at the net. How'd you like to keep 100% of your taxes?
I would like to bring home my gross as something that everyone can appreciate regardless of their affiliation or ideology.
It really is. And then it comes down to you or us, we the consumer, we the people, on how much money we want to spend on taxes. Oh. And it puts everybody on a level playing field because the wealthy who can afford the accountants, the high-powered accountants and attorneys, they can tend to siphon off more money from our progressive tax code. And so let's simplify it where nobody needs those things.
Yeah, but what I really love, too, about the fair tax is the fact that it puts Social Security and Medicare, which seem to be really sacred cows up there, on much better footing now. Those programs now are supported only by people who earn paychecks. If you get the fair tax, which earmarks a certain amount of money for each of those programs, then people who are not earning wages, that are getting investment income and stuff like that, they become supporters of those programs as well.
And that's a great point that probably needs to be talked about more, because what we're told up there by the powers that be, or the smart people that come in and talk about this, the economists, everybody I talk to, it doesn't matter what their political affiliation is, we hear that Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid are all insolvent in a certain amount of years. Social Security disability was going to be insolvent in 2017. It was insolvent in 2016. But what we did in the last Congress is they approved borrowing another $155 billion out of Social Security to put into Social Security disability to keep it afloat for another year or two. And if we don't make some major changes, and if we don't make these soon, these programs are going to be that much more insolvent, that much quicker, because we're taking from the very thing that's supposed to be funding them and putting them in a failing program because we're not addressing the major issues. In my opinion, the fair tax would help eliminate those strains on those programs.
Oh, absolutely. That of course, you hear some of these dishonest rhetoric that says that we get rid of the payroll taxes, that they will translate into that we're going to get rid of those programs, which is certainly not true at all.
No, it's not, and I think that's one of the big misnomers. They're like, people will say, well, this is the stuff that's funding Social Security and these other things, and when they get the understanding of how that will be funded through the fair tax, you can just see them come to this side and say, well, yeah, we really should do this.
Let me switch gears a little bit here. Last time we were here, we talked to you a little bit about PopVox, the website that lets people, express their opinion on various pieces of pending legislation. FAIRtax has an overwhelming positive support on PopVox. Is that something that you're seeing as well from your constituents?
It is. We see a little bit of that, but not a whole lot of that. There's a lot of good organizations that do things like that. And this is what I encourage everybody to do. Become engaged. Well, number one, become informed, get involved, and get engaged in the process. It is government by we the people, but only if we exercise those rights. And you do it through those kind of forums, PopVox or National Write Your Congressman, if it's okay if I bring that up. Call your representative. Go to town halls. Demand answers on these. Why haven't you looked at this? Why are you not promoting the fair tax? Because we've got to have a taxing policy to bring money into the government to run those basic infrastructures or projects that the government is supposed to do. And it's up to us to determine how we want that done. And this, again, I'll always stay a proponent of this. I think it's the smartest way to go.
Gut feeling, do you think we'll actually see this happen in our lifetime?
Gut feeling?
Sorry about that. Sorry for the curveball.
Got me on a
buddy.
pause there. I think it's possible. I know with the public behind us, there's nothing we can't do. Without the public behind us, there's nothing we can accomplish. If you want to see this pass, and I think it's possible, but it's only going to be if we have a grassroots organization, which you guys have done great, because it's being heard in committees now, whereas 5 years ago they wouldn't even look at it. And if we continue pushing down that road, I think it is possible. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I hope so. I thank you so much for talking with us today.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate your time.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. Thank you, and good luck, and keep up the great work.
And that's our interview with Congressman Ted Yoho, Florida's 3rd Congressional District. Ron, a couple of things that he said that really struck me was his optimism that Congress still has their eye on the ball as far as tax reform. These terrorist attacks, police shootings and all are certainly occupying a lot of people's thoughts these days, but Congress still has their eye on tax reform and wants to get it done.
Yeah, I don't know if that's because of the election, the upcoming election. I think it's also partially, I have to give credit to Steve Hayes and Peggy Green Ernst. They're two of the board members of the Americans for Fair Taxation. They go up to D.C. every month and they, talk to people, and they've been getting more interest too on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah, that interest is growing, maybe not so much in the fair tax itself, but the traditional opposition to the fair tax seems to be softening to the idea of a consumption tax.
Definitely.
And once that factor is in the equation and we start talking about it, then the fair tax just rises to the top of the thing with no problem at all.
When people really look at it.
Yeah, when they understand it, they'll demand it.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
a little catchphrase.
Where have I heard that before? But yeah, and it helps. Like I said, a couple of our board members are going up there. And another thing that helped is a Democrat Senator, Ben Cardin from Maryland. He put forth a proposal that contains a consumption tax and an income tax. Now, those of us on this side of the proposal, we don't think that's a good idea, but the fact that he had a consumption tax, which is really a big part of his plan, I read over the summary of his plan, that has gotten people on both sides of the aisle looking at consumption tax. So that really helped us.
Okay, and as noted earlier that as I say, the leadership's not quite there yet. But some rank and file Democrats are coming to the idea of a consumption tax, and it was also noted in the interview that some of the experts, so-called, that were involved in getting Paul Ryan's Better Way thing had really nice things to say about a consumption tax.
They sure did.
Let's see if we can make this thing work like a consumption tax, give us the same kind of benefits. So there's a real light at the end of the tunnel there.
And we addressed this Better Way plan by Paul Ryan in the last couple of episodes. We encourage you to go listen to those if you haven't already. Paul Ryan told Kevin Brady, who's the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, I want you to come up with a tax plan that fits these parameters. He did not say come up with the best tax plan you could possibly think of. He said one that fits these parameters, and those parameters are still within the income tax frame of mind. Mm-hmm. So it's not the best way. It may be a better way, but it's not the best way.
Yeah, I'm glad to see, though, that Kevin Brady has not abandoned the fair tax movement to the way that some people have said that he has by getting behind this Better Way plan. That it's possibly a stepping stone to getting there.
Yeah. I was made to understand that in the Ways and Means Committee, the agenda is set not by the chair of the Ways and Means, it's set by the Speaker of the House, which I was surprised, but that's the way it goes in politics these days. So it is Mr. Ryan that sets the agenda. So Kevin Brady definitely is still a strong fair tax supporter. As you heard from Mr. Yoho, Mr. Yoho is very, very strong. Like I said, I wish we had 100 of these guys.
Oh, amen.
Yeah. So another thing that came to mind is that you asked him a couple of times, and he responded about public support.
Oh, yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, he couldn't emphasize enough how important it is for the public to get behind this and call their senators and congressmen in wherever you live in this country, in all 50 states and the territories and so forth, and tell your representatives and your senators you expect them to support and co-sponsor the fair tax. Very, very important. They need to hear from the public.
Yeah, and we've been hitting on this a lot here on FTPR. One of the best ways, if not the best way to do that, short of a phone call or a face-to-face meeting with a candidate or the congressman, him or herself, is PopVox.
PopVox is that's one very good way. All right, that's an excellent way because you can go there and look up any legislation you feel passionate about. I would recommend you go to the Fair Tax First, HR 25, and put in your pros and cons and so forth, and your comments will go to your congressman and your two senators. Another one in which you can really support us is BigSolution.org. Very important website for us. BigSolution.org. That is the newest website by the Americans for Fair Taxation. And there you can go and actually get involved. And we encourage you, as Mr. Yoho did in the interview, get involved. We need public participation. We need the public insisting to the representatives that they sponsor the fair tax.
And the time is now, because as they say, the iron is hot. Once they get something passed, they're probably going to push tax reform back to the back burner.
Yeah.
And so if we're going to get this thing, we've got to really push for it now.
And Mr. Yoho was a little hesitant about when you asked him about when do you think we can get this done in our lifetime.
I didn't figure that was such a curveball question to him.
I was jumping out of my skin. Yes, 2017. 2017 is going to be the year. We're going to get it done in 2017.
Oh, mercy. Time flies when we're having fun, doesn't it?
Let's send out that email address. It's the FairtaxGuys@gmail.com. Send your comments. We're on Facebook, Facebook.com/the FairtaX Guys. And you can communicate with us, ask questions, tell us you like what you hear, and tell us you don't like what you hear. We can take it. All right. And also go on to the Fairtax.org if you need all kinds of information on Fairtax.org. And again, BigSolution.org. That's where you can get involved and you become part of the solution. BigSolution.org.
Call your congressman, write your congressman, go to their town halls, and stand up for the fair tax.
That's
going
right.
to wrap it up for this edition of Fair Tax Power Radio. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
Reminding you once again that the fair tax is America's big solution, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
Fair tax is coming.